Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I thought I might sit down and have a nice catch up with you all, offer some updates. I know I haven't done a video of this variety in quite some time where I share some favorites or just general happenings in my life. So I thought it would be nice to offer something like this. I also said I was going to in my former video. I've been away from social media and filming and just the content in general for a couple of months, or at least it's been very sparse, and I just thought it might be nice for anybody who's interested. I know this isn't going to appeal to anyone, to everyone, but I do think we have a nice little community going on here, and there are a couple of you who were so nice to reach out in comments or messages or emails just asking if I was okay or if I was gone, if I was coming back, and I didn't really offer a disclaimer anywhere about why I'd been a bit missing, or why I was missing, and what my intentions were if I was going to come back. So here's all of the updates surrounding that. It's going to be a little bit of a ramble, so if you want to grab a snack, get a tea, start doing some sort of activity and have this on in the background, go for it. I'm going to also share some books and decks that I've been loving and using. Not too much in that way, but I might start with those and use those as jumping off points to talk about a lot of the other updates I have. When it comes to decks, the decks have not really changed. It's pretty much just either a Toth deck, a Marseille, or some playing cards, none of which are going to be new. None of the varieties even are new, but we have just Greenie. I use this all the time personally and with clients. I have a version of a Noble that I use quite a bit. The Midnight deck that I've shown and talked about how much I love recently. So there's that. And I'm realizing this lighting is horrible, so I apologize. I'm not sick, I'm just a bit tired, and the lighting is super harsh. It's like that white glare, snowy, rainy, like white sky kind of light, and it's not an optimal time of the day either. So I'm looking rather washed out, but I'm also tired and I have my coffee. So we're waking up together if you're watching this in the morning, or maybe you're not. So we have those decks. Pretty straightforward. I haven't read nearly as much in the last few months, I would say, as maybe I had in former months. That was just, I think, connected in with the fact that I was in a little bit of a rut and a confused state. I still feel like I'm in a bit of an in-between period. So all of the books that I'm going to share are actually novels, fictional novels. I love fantasy and science fiction. I talk about it all the time. I try to incorporate it into my magical and spiritual practice, into my tarot practice. I have plenty of videos talking about that and creating activities surrounding things like that. I tend to find that when I'm either not happy or I'm confused or I'm dissatisfied with my life, I like to escape into other worlds. And I'm already a fantasy lover. I forget, what is it? For my fellow, I think it's INTP. I think I got that right. Or is it IN? I forget the Myers-Briggs types, but that's, I know that I'm the one that is like, likes the fantasy, like dreamscape type of thing, escaping reality, and I can definitely fall into those sorts of escapist tendencies. Even when life is good, I like to imagine it all to be one big story that I can contribute to, or that things are magical. I romanticize everything. So when times aren't good, I love to escape into novels. It's like my favorite thing, just because I'll be, dissatisfied with my own life at that moment. So some of the books that I've read recently are these two. We have A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. I read and showed the first book in this series a few months ago. I think it was called A Different Kind of Magic or A Darker Kind of Magic. I can't remember. So I read the second one. I figured out that there are two more in the series. And I also read the third one. And the third one is A Conjuring of Light. So I read the second and the third back to back. They're both great. They're a little bit on the larger side, but I would say quicker reads. And really, this is a fantasy world where magic exists, or there are multiple worlds, and magic exists in one of them, in this parallel world where a lot of it takes place in London, and it's a different London. There's Grey London, which would be our sort of mundane London. There's Red London, where one of our protagonists is from, and that's a very magical world where magic is doing well. There's White London, which has magic but is kind of harsh and cold and dying, and there's Black London, which kind of caved in on itself because it misused magic or allowed it to overtake. It's very interesting, the idea of traveling through worlds. There's a lot of differences in perspective, so we don't get one protagonist in these books, which I like, because the first protagonist that I thought was going to be our main one in the first book wasn't my favorite character. I think I really liked the worlds in both of these books, and there were certain side characters that I enjoyed more than some of the prominent characters, but I think the author kind of picked up on that, because by the third book we were getting a lot of perspectives from those characters, making them more central, which I appreciated. There's also attention to detail in terms of the timeline, kind of, being retrospective and having lots of flashbacks, and I think that builds the story, it enhances the characters, gives us more of an investment in the world and the people that we are following. So definitely recommend that series if you're looking for a fun, magical sort of series that is pretty fast-paced. There's a lot of action in these books as well. I would definitely consider it fantasy, action, thriller in some regards. It's a little bit straightforward in that, it's that typical, we have the bad guy to fight sort of deal. It's not at all trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of plot points, but it does it pretty well. So would recommend those ones highly, read those, enjoyed them. And then by the same author, I found this series. It's a 2-book series as far as I know. It's only going to remain at 2 books. So we have Vicious and Vengeful. These I would consider more science fiction than fantasy, although it could kind of fall into either camp. It takes place in the world that we know, so and it's modern day, so there are cell phones and cities and this and that, but the city that a lot of the things happen in is a fictional city, and it kind of has this almost like Gotham City sort of feeling, the way it's described or the way things happen within it. And what goes down in here is it's supposed to be, there are multiple perspectives as well. This one definitely plays with timelines. In both books, you're starting with, you're leading up to a certain time, and you're getting things that are very close to that time that you're leading up to. And then a lot of the book is essentially just these flashbacks through, whether it's a few days prior or years prior, and it involves the characters and their interconnection. So it's very much one of these stories of feels like a web. Things are coming together, everything's tied together. Found it very interesting. It also investigates things in a way where, there's a big moral gray zone. Ethics are messed up. Of all the main characters, you might not totally agree with any of them, and they're all doing some pretty messed up things throughout the book, and you kind of just have to understand it, or at least try to wrap your head around it. I kind of like that all of the characters were, in some ways, very flawed and unlikable, yet you still found yourself rooting for them nonetheless, and I think it's just a very interesting way to approach a book. So Vicious, Vengeful, also highly recommend, by the same author. I know V.E. Schwab has a few other books out there. I've read the descriptions of them or a few pages out of them, and they don't appeal to me as much, but who knows, I do like those series very much specifically. So I think the only other book, I'm trying to remember even the last time I offered book updates, the only one that I can think of aside from those was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I believe this is a series, and that I think there's 4 out right now. And again, this is another one that's a little bit on the bigger side. I like series, and I like thicker, chunkier books, especially with fantasy and sci-fi, because I never want them to end. I like when there's the proper amount, in my opinion, of space to fully develop characters and worlds. I'm all along for that ride. I want you to paint a picture for me. I want it to be highly visual in its experience. I also want it to have a lot of action. I want there to be a lot of movement and momentum, keeping me turning the pages. All of these books have a common theme for me in that they were a little bit more fast-paced, and I was turning the pages. I felt very involved. It wasn't a slow book. None of these are very meditative or reflective. They're very much punchy in some ways. We have these feisty, saucy protagonists. In this one specifically, we get the one singular protagonist, which is different from those other books, but this is a world, a sort of fantasy world, I guess, or an alternate world where psychic abilities in a more fantastical way are prevalent or present. People can tap into these very physical, visceral psychic connections. It's also illegal. So you have a whole government system that seeks these people out and wants to terminate them, essentially. Come to find out that other beings from other planes have entered the dynamic. It's very complicated. Lots of world building going on here. I would say if you're into, there's tarot in here. There's the use of different terminology in terms of spiritual and psychic things, different planes of existence and consciousness and auras and things like that. So you might find this interesting. Some of it did frustrate me. For example, they categorize all of the people with any of these abilities as clairvoyance, and they shorten it to voyance. However, the majority of the abilities don't involve sight, and clairvoyance as an ability or as a term references directly the idea of seeing, of it being a visual form of psychic perception, whereas even the protagonist, her ability is not rooted in anything visual, and a lot of the characters' abilities are not inherently or necessarily visual in their practice, in their exercise. So to call them all clairvoyants felt a little bit off. Some of the terminology was also a little bit off, but there was a scene with a Thoth deck, and that definitely stole my heart. If you're into that sort of psychic realm, psychic world type thing, I think you would enjoy this. That being said, that takes us through the books and decks. I've mentioned that I really was just using those as a little bit of an escape. I guess now I'll get into the life updates. Really how this all began was that back in the end of September going into October, I had COVID. That kind of put me out of commission, and it did take me longer to recover than I'd anticipated. I wouldn't say I had it in any sort of serious way where I was so debilitated in a way that was really scary. I was thankful in that I didn't get it in that way, but it did cause a lot of mental fog, and I fell out of a lot of my habits and routines and had a lot of trouble picking them back up and getting back into them. I also then fell into an extended period of a lack of inspiration. I like to make videos about topics and things that I feel passionate about. They're really never forced, and they're always things that I feel very compelled to speak about or do on camera, and I didn't want to try to force something, and nothing was really coming to me. I wasn't receiving that inspiration. I wasn't feeling compelled. So, and the longer it went on, it was not intentional to stay away for any period of time. I didn't make an active decision. It was just, 1 week goes by and then another, and it just sort of gets away from you sort of deal. And I fell out of it. So I'm glad that I'm feeling a lot better now. I'd like to be making more videos. I was also kind of going through a bit of, I wouldn't say an identity crisis, but really trying to check in and be realistic with myself about where I'm at. A couple people have also remarked that my website is down. It's under construction, so it's being redone. I'm really excited about it. It's taking longer than I anticipated, and that's partially my fault, but it will be up and running, and you can book readings there very shortly. I am actually shifting a bit in the way of careers. For the past almost 3 years now, about 3 years now, have been a full-time professional tarot reader, and as much as I love it, and I don't think I'll ever stop offering readings, it's definitely something I want to do on the side. So if you are looking to book readings, they will still be available into the future if you're not, but it hasn't been giving me what I needed. I think, a little bit more structure, and I'm looking for more financial freedom and independence and some more guarantees in my life. There's also the fact that being a tarot reader and you have to be very structured, you have to be very self-disciplined, which I can be, but it can get lonely, and it's nice when there's structures and people in place to hold you accountable. And I'm an introvert, but it can get pretty lonely when you're the only one you're working with. Yes, I work with clients. It's very much a connected experience where the act of tarot reading involves another person, but not having necessarily, co-workers or projects that you're working on or things that you're working with people to collaborate on can be a little bit lonely. So I am about to start a more conventional job, a 9 to 5 at a company. I'm pretty excited. I really like the idea of what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to necessarily say where I'm working or the super nitty-gritty specifics of what I'm going to be doing, just because I'd like to also, as the future comes, speak very candidly about my experiences. And if somebody knows where I work or what I do, it might not go so well. I'm not sure about the legality or what's ethical in terms of sharing about the workplace. And if nobody knows where I work or what I do, I feel more comfortable being able to say whatever I want, which I'd like to, because in some ways I also have felt a bit like a failure. I don't actually now, but I toyed with the idea just because it seems like, based on what we see on social media, general societal values at the moment, that the goal is to leave the 9 to 5 and become your own boss, or to escape the monotony of the office in turn for something that offers a lot more freedom and autonomy, and where you're kind of at the helm of your own ship. And so there are countless videos out there about people being free spirits and succeeding and breaking away from these jobs. And I guess it kind of feels like I'm doing the opposite. I'm taking my very free, self-built career and way of working and living and going in the opposite direction, or the other direction. And I then decided, I don't actually feel like a failure, but I look at all of these things and all the content I consume and all of what's popular out there, and it is kind of oppositional. So I want to document my journey, specifically going from a job that is my own, where I am my own boss, and into the work that I'm going to be doing. I'm not sure how exciting it is or what I'll share or show and all of that, but I would love to document the process a little bit, because I feel like the flip side is never shown. It's kind of just kept hidden, and it's also not as appealing in some ways, but I don't think that that's necessarily a virtue of circumstance, more so just values and the way things are showcased and what we all gravitate toward. I'm personally very excited for the direction things are going in for me, so I'd like to document it. And I think it might be, a unique perspective, and for anybody else out there who can resonate with, being at the type of job that I'm going to be at, and, finding value in that and navigating life within that as a spiritual person, as a tarot reader. I'm definitely still going to be doing readings, on weekends and at night. It's not something I plan to stop doing, but it's not going to be my primary means of income. And I think that might actually make it feel a lot more enjoyable for me. I wouldn't say that I was not enjoying tarot, but that it just started to feel like a chore, and I didn't then have a desire to pull cards for myself or sit at my altar or sacred space or do anything like that, read certain books on certain things, because I was so surrounded by it day in and day out. And then when I did go to pull cards or do readings, I'm pulling, for example, cards about my career. I'm pulling tarot cards about pulling tarot cards, and it just kind of felt like I was pouring water on water, and it was all the same substance getting homogenized. And I almost think it would be more fun to be able to implement spirituality, spiritual practices, magic, tarot readings on something that is a little bit more conventional and tangible and mundane, that is not inherently tied up in what it is I'm already doing. So I can keep it as something that's personal. I think it'll add a lot of zest and life to it. It won't feel like work at that point. It'll feel a lot more like an enjoyable experience, a part of my sense of self, as opposed to not really seeing where I end and my work begins, or vice versa. And I know that's not the case for everybody. I'm just speaking for myself. Some people love and find so much value in having their spiritual practice or their tarot practice be combined with their work, and that be their work. And I was enjoying that to some regard, but I do think I needed this change, and I'm excited for what it brings. I've reflected on some other wonderful creators on YouTube, especially within this community, who seem to talk about this topic. The one that comes to mind is Thorne Mooney, who is quite an accomplished practitioner and professional even in the witch, pagan, spiritual community in terms of her published works and being a leader of a coven. Leader, is it priestess? I forget the titles and specifics, but she also talks a lot about how she doesn't see herself giving up her mundane job or her 9-to-5 job, and that she values it for the structure and the routine and things like that. And I can kind of see the appeal in what she's talking about. I would say that in this time I've learned so much, and I actually do have a lot of experience I think I can bring to a different workplace or a different environment. And if I had gone straight into this type of work before taking the few years that I had, I'm not sure it would have gone so well. I'm a lot more self-aware. I know myself a lot better because of this, whereas James 3 years ago did not feel sure about anything, about his thoughts, his emotions. I wasn't sure about most things, and I feel really thankful and grateful that I'm at such a good place with myself and my relationship with myself. I know myself, I trust myself, I am confident. I know that for the most part, any scenario that I'm thrown into or anything that I'm asked or called to do, I will find a way, just by virtue of being through a lot of different circumstances that have tested me, things that I've had to do for myself, and knowing that I can handle most things that are thrown my way. So I'm excited, I'm looking forward to it, and I just wanted to offer that bit of an update. I definitely still want to make videos as well, tarot, spiritual, magical, all of that sort. I'm not sure what kind of quality they will take on or what the topics will look like, but I'm not planning on changing the core values of this channel or what I do here. It will be a little bit more, I think, personal and friendly and connected now, and it will feel a little bit less like I'm trying to seem a certain way, to be perceived a certain way for the sake of hopefully people wanting to book with me because of the way I come across or what I espouse or what I can offer. Now I think I'll feel a lot more comfortable just getting on camera, being and doing being who I want, doing what I want, and it not having to be a reflection of me professionally. This is now my personal playground, so I'm a bit more excited for that and to get back into my spiritual practice, to kind of have a renaissance, hopefully, in my relationship with those parts of myself and see where I can go with all of that. So I guess that's that on that. I'm sure I've missed plenty considering it's been so many months, but those are the bigger aspects that I think are worth remarking upon and sharing. If you have any questions, ask me down below. If there's anything else you want to know, if I need to, make any further videos updating on anything or talking about certain things, also let me know. I'd be very curious to know how you are all doing. I've missed so many of you, especially those of you who I recognize in the comment sections frequently, who I also see as friends, who are fellow community members, whether you make content or are more present in just being involved in other ways. I've missed a lot of people. So yes, I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this was fun or interesting, or don't. And until next time, bye.